is 30th of January. We're going to talk to Spencer Feldman this hour, part 2 of our conversation, which was very interesting, about why relationships fail. Not all of them, but most of them run into the same general roadblocks. They're treacherous, and they'll sneak up on you. It has to do with hormones, all kinds of things. And we're going to do part 2 tonight. Maybe I'll put that up as a YouTube video as well. You can find that in my channel. Just look on the top right side at Rense News for the YouTube channel. And, well, let's see where it is. I want to look. And, there it is, third one down, all right? Why most relationships fail. Amazing. Spencer, welcome back.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. What kind of response did you get from our first visit?
It was great. We got a lot of downloads, and there were people who said that that was information that was useful to them, which is, what the goal was.
Very useful. I mean, it's nice to know when you're walking in a dark room, if there's a piece of furniture in front of you you're going to fall over, or a hole you're going to fall into. I mean, it's just crazy out there. And we really are, in a way, walking in the dark when we fall in love. We made that pretty clear. There are 3 basic stages of it, which you can all listen to anytime you want. Just go to the YouTube video, take a listen. So where do we want to go tonight with part 2 on this?
So in the first book, in the first talk, I was discussing how my perspective is that genetically we're kind of sucker punched. We're kind of manipulated by our DNA for genetic diversity rather than for happily ever after.
Right.
And in today's talk, I'd like to discuss another way in which genetics play dirty with us, specifically for men. And that is what I've come to is I believe that 95% of us are genetically programmed to become followers and not leaders. And what I'd like to do is explain why I think that is, what kind of consequences it has for us personally and socially and with large and larger scale social events. And then what the path would be to outwit our DNA now in terms of activating leadership within a man rather than getting to happily ever after with a couple.
Let me do something a little bit sideways here. What kind of a man do most women want? What do they look for? Consciously, subconsciously, genetically? What does their DNA want? Do they want a follower, or do they want an alpha male leader?
Right. So you've identified part of the issue, which is women are genetically programmed to want the strong man, the provider, the protector, right? Men want the nester, the nurturer, that women want provide and protect. And even though our minds might say, well, no, I'm not an animal, I have my own desires and my own intentions and my own rules for things, we still have to take in consideration that our bodies and our genetics are going to have a say in the matter. So here's what I've discovered, Jeff. In pack dynamics, and wolves and apes, it's about 20-1. This seems to be the optimal ratio in pack dynamics. Mm-hmm. Now, if you have greater than 20-1, too many followers, it's hard for the leader to manage. And then if you have too many leaders, then they're going to fight until one leads. And so it tends to close in on this 20-1 ratio. Mm-hmm. And this has unintended consequences outside of a pack society. We are not living tribally now. We're living one-on-one with our partners. And what ends up happening is women are not going to be satisfied genetically with a follower as a man, with a weak man. And 95% of men are going to have some degree of programming genetically to be in a following support position.
Well, isn't that stacking the deck against both sexes?
Well, sure. It's not useful to us, right? What worked for us in pack dynamics is not working for us today. Women will be unsatisfied with it. Children end up with no strong male to imprint on a lot of times because there's no strong male there.
Not anymore, especially if they are allowed to watch television.
Right. I mean, socially you see this playing out. And the what happens in a larger scale is that followers can be led to war. If we were a nation full of heroes, if every man was a hero, if every man was a leader, then when someone said, all right, we're going to war, we'd all look at the fellow and say, no, I'm not signing up for that. You want a war, you go off and do it. I'm doing my thing.
Spencer, I'll take 25%. If we had 25% who said no, we wouldn't go to war.
Yeah.
That 25% would be out in the streets. They'd be doing whatever the hell it took to stop that insanity. Smedley Butler said it all so long ago. War is a racket. It's all about enforcing the predatory, vampiric goals of the international globalist elite. Horrible. They're just extracting wealth from anyone and every sovereign nation they can get their hands on, constantly.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Jeff. So we need to raise a new generation of heroes. Now, alpha male is a politically incorrect term nowadays.
Oh.
But there's really two kinds of alpha males, and I would call them kings and tyrants. Now, a tyrant rules by force and intimidation. A king leads through strength of character. And because we have so few alpha kings, alpha has become synonymous with tyrants. But I'd like to talk about the noble alpha, what I call the king.
Right.
Now, the first lesson a king gets, a young man gets, is called social play. And you'll see this in animals. They will wrestle and they'll play fights together. And if you observe this in animals, you see a couple of things. Very rarely does anybody get hurt. Animals don't hurt each other. When they bite, they don't bite hard. Yeah. Also, they alternate winner or loser or dominant and submissive. They'll go back and forth. One wolf will be on top, and then it'll switch, and another wolf will be on top. Another rule is they don't escalate excessively. They keep it light. So when you find humans that don't get social play, right? Humans that don't get social play, like animals, are more likely to become violent and more likely to experience violence. Animals that don't get social play have a terrible time finding a mate, experience violence on themselves, and become violent themselves. So the first thing is get out there and wrestle around with your kid, right? And the rules are nobody gets hurt. Let the kid get on top, then you get on top. And then, you go back and forth. You don't escalate excessively. You call out aggression. Hey, you know what? You pushed too hard. And then if someone calls it out on you, you say, hey, my bad, I'm sorry. Right? So call out aggression, apologize if needed, and forgive and move on. This is the first lesson of a king, is social play. And when we do this, we end up with psychologically healthy kids. The guy who got up in the tower, I don't remember what college that was years ago, and was shooting at everybody.
Whitman.
One of the things they found out is, one of the things they found out about him and a lot of people that do these acts of great terror, they never got social play. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I'd like to point out, because what I did is I started studying animals to start, wolves, the great apes. And then I started studying humans and leaders. And what I found was that there was a language of kings. So I'd like to share that with your audience now. I'd like to talk about how a follower or beta speaks, how a toxic alpha or tyrant speaks, and how a king speaks. Because
Interesting.
we want to move towards
toxic alpha. A lot of toxic alpha out there. And I think a lot of that is frankly generated by the corruption that media outlets constantly bombard people with. What an alpha male is supposed to be. It turns out that many of them are quite toxic. It's a good term. Go ahead.
The beta talks to, when a beta speaks, they speak to ask permission. A toxic alpha speaks by threatening, and a king speaks to delegate authority. These are very different ways of communicating.
Say that again.
Sure. A beta will ask permission, a toxic alpha will threaten, and a king will delegate authority. Very different ways of handling a situation. 3
different paths of, let's call it diplomacy, all right? Cultural diplomacy. Interesting.
Sure. Now, a beta will flatter, a toxic alpha will insult, and a king will encourage. A beta is defensive. A toxic alpha counterattacks and interrogates, and a king holds accountable. A beta complains, a toxic alpha blames, a king calls to action. Both betas and and toxic alphas will minimize, lie, and exaggerate. Kings are honest. Finally, a beta self-deprecates. A toxic alpha brags, and a king simply accepts thanks when someone says, well, job well done. So think about it. If someone is complaining, Jeff, who are they complaining to? They're complaining to the person they think can fix the situation. They're complaining to the alpha. They're complaining to the leader. The act of complaining automatically, psychologically puts someone in a position of follower talking to a leader.
All right, good point.
The act of speaking defensively, who are you defending against? You're defending against someone attacking you, right? Mm-hmm. A king doesn't worry about being attacked. Mm-hmm. He'll hold himself accountable.
There are a lot of people, Spencer, who specialize, they're past masters at conversationally, let's just say, putting people on the defensive. They'll make an allegation that is partially true. Maybe it's whole cloth fiction. Doesn't matter. The idea is to push somebody off balance, make them defend or explain themselves. As soon as that happens, that person is now subservient. He or she is on the defensive. You can't get anything done when you're on the defensive. Nothing.
What I would say is a lot of people are invited linguistically to take a beta submissive role by toxic alphas that enjoy threatening, attacking, and interrogating the people they speak to.
And
so, of course,
absolutely. And lying, and reverse projecting their own behaviors on other people constantly, making false accusations, again to accrue power by dominating and subjugating someone else who is forced on the defensive. I've seen this all my life.
So one of the sets of rules I made for myself was I was not going to complain or defend. I would not lie, exaggerate, or self-deprecate. And learning how to change my linguistics was probably the most difficult part of this journey that I took. Now, here's another part. It's how a king apologizes. And what I came to was that there are really two kinds of apologies, what I would call a soft apology and a hard apology. A soft apology is when your mistake caused another person pain. And that's when you say, I'm sorry. That's a soft apology. Now, a hard apology is when you made a tactical error. And that's, yes, I could have handled that better. Now, if a person doesn't apologize, or when they should, or they don't give a soft apology when they should, that's a toxic alpha. They're not taking into consideration they've hurt someone. And if they don't do a hard apology...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Some toxic alphas never apologize. It's just not in their it's not in their nomenclature. They don't know it. They don't deal with it. They will not do it, period.
So if you don't give a soft apology when you should, and you don't display compassion, well, that makes a person a toxic alpha. But if you don't do a hard apology when you should, when you make a tactical error and you don't own up, well, okay, that's not a king either. So a king owns up their mistakes, and owns them up in the right way. But here's the caveat. If somebody keeps asking for additional apologies over and over again, well, this is kind of like putting you on the defensive, right? They're inviting you to a beta position. Decline the invitation. You make your apology once, the right kind of apology. And if they keep asking for it, then you have a right to flip it on them and say, wait a minute, I gave you that apology. Now you're just, ragging on me.
You're trying to manipulate me, of course, playing games. Yeah. Now, we should also point out here that king, I think, in terms of this conversation, is inclusive of male and female. You're just not saying king and queen. Because is this strictly a male dissertation? We want to be clear on that.
That's a great question, Jeff. And this is what I would say. There are women who have to take a kingship role now. Perhaps there's no man in the house and she's raising boys, and she has to model for her boys what it is to be a king.
Sure.
Or she goes out into the world, into quote-unquote a man's world, and she has to compete in a boardroom, and she has to deal with what I'll get into in a second, which is the pecking order that establishes itself. So absolutely, all the things I'm talking about apply to kingship, regardless of what gender you are.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. That's the linguistics of it. There's another kind of language, and this is the body language of kings. Now, when a person isn't speaking verbally, that's one thing, but your body is always broadcasting something, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going to take this journey into kingship, then we have to also be mindful of our body language, because it's always talking.
Right.
Now, if you look at the body language of beta apes, the follower apes, and then you will see this in humans too, what you find is it's a shift towards fetal position. The arms and legs cross, the head tilts forward, the shoulders rotate inwards. All of this, I think, is a protective and subconscious desire to go back to the womb.
Sure, it's a defensive pose. It's an escape, well, a reflexive escape to a very secure comfort zone in our existence, and it's understandable. But yes, quite clearly, if someone's sitting up straight, shoulders back, head up, alert, looking around, as opposed to someone in the position you described, you've got two totally different, diametrically opposed people at work.
What they actually found is when they checked the testosterone level in people who assumed either a fetal position or a victory position, arms stretched out like you just crossed the finish line in first place, the victory position will that person will actually have a higher testosterone level than if they took a fetal position. So it actually changes your own neurochemistry. But so we want the body language of kings not just because it's going to change our own neurochemistry, but because of the message it sends out to others. You walk down a dark street, head up, shoulders back, versus hunched over a little bit. It's a totally different signal to predators and to the social world at large.
Oh, yeah.
Now, here's another one. You know what they do? Have you heard of the term of swaddling for an infant, Jeff?
Say again?
Swaddling. It's where you take a baby and you wrap...
Yes, of course. Of course.
Yeah. Okay. So swaddling is where you wrap a child up in cloth so it can't move. And it simulates being in a womb where there's just no room, yeah. Now, so the first rule of body language for kings is don't assume a fetal position. Assume the opposite of it. Also, don't swaddle. Keep your arms and legs open. One of the classic signs you'll see is it's called fig leafing. You'll see men cross their hands over their groin. Apes do this, men do this. It's classic. If you look at photographs of a lot of men together, you'll see a number of them will have their hands crossed over their groin, and then one or two of them will have their arms and legs open. Here's another one. Nervous tics. Don't shuffle your feet. Don't fidget. Another tough one for some people is oral fixations. This would be chewing gum or, biting fingertips or smoking cigarettes or drinking from straws all the time. I think these are infantile desires for the breast again. And then finally, auto-grooming. Auto-grooming is when a man kind of strokes himself, tries to raise his own oxytocin level by grooming himself. Now, it's different in a woman. When a woman runs her fingers through her hair and strokes herself on that side of the equation, that's usually a courtship sign. It means she's interested in you. But if a man does it, if a man is grooming himself, what he's really saying is he doesn't have anyone to groom himself. He's low on the pecking order. Because in the primate world, the higher up you go towards alpha, the more other animals want to groom you for favor and for connection with you. So if you notice any of these things in your own physical vocabulary, hands and arms crossing, the head going forward, the shoulders rotating inwards, if you do all these things, just start reversing them, right? Keep your hands out of your pockets, your chin up. if you're fighting, right, in a fighting pose, your chin comes down because you want to protect the neck and you don't want to get a knockout punch to the jaw. But a king isn't afraid of anything. And who would dare attack the king? That's the attitude. So a king puts his chin up because he has no fear. He's not worried about someone attacking him. To give it another animal perspective, and this is a little intense, when there are two alphas...
Hold on, Spencer. We have to pause. Let's do that right after this short timeout.
You got it.
Very interesting already. It would be well worth listening to this again, all of you, and take a few notes. Maybe to some of you it's familiar, but it's been laid out very, very succinctly, very pragmatically. Nice linear thought. We'll be right back with Spencer Feldman and continue to develop this theme in just a couple of minutes. Okay, and welcome back. And just a little reminder, these general templates we're talking about apply to both male and female for a number of reasons. Not necessarily 100% equally, but the parallels are clear. You have a woman who's the breadwinner in a home. She should be aware of these very things we're talking about. It's a society now which is gender confused by design and getting worse. So you make your call. Okay. Go ahead, Spencer.
All right. So I wanted to explain why animals, primates, and humans cover their groin as a subconscious sign of being submissive. In the ape community, when two animals are fighting for alpha position, one is challenging, an up-and-coming is challenging the dominant. The loser has his testicles torn off his body, which is usually fatal. So in the primate kingdom, you'll see animals cover their groin. What they're really saying is, I'm not interested in having sex, I'm not a genetic threat, please don't attack me. And that's not what we want to be portraying for ourselves, right? So here's how it starts moving into the human realm. And this will be alpha testing from other men. Pecking orders always form when men or groups of people get together. Women will have their pecking orders. I'm talking about it for men right now. And there is going to be an exchange of domination and submission signals, both with words and with body language. And pretty quickly, the pecking order will be dialed in.
Let me throw something else in there, Spencer. I don't know if you're familiar with reverse speech or not, but that's another issue that I believe is fully involved with all of this. We're hearing people at a subconscious level in reverse. Speech is reversed at the subconscious level, and the subconscious, that's just the trade in currency it uses. It hears very clearly what your real truth is. If you say to someone, wow, I really like that new jacket, and you think it's ugly, in reverse you're going to say, ugly jacket, or something like that. And that will be heard loud and clear in your spoken forward speech by the person or people you are speaking to. That's why if you're around people and you have a very uncomfortable feeling for some reason you can't put your finger on, it's usually because you're hearing them speak in reverse at your subconscious level, and you get the artifice and the deception that they're putting on as the mask they are wearing and that which they want you to believe they really are, when in point of fact they're not. Not necessarily anyway. So that's another dynamic, I think.
Sure. Well, when groups are getting together and the pecking order is forming, toxic alphas rise by intimidation. Kings rise by respect and natural authority. For a king to rise, all he has to do is decline beta invitations. So when someone tries to dominate you physically or verbally, you don't have to attack back. You don't have to be a toxic alpha to a toxic alpha. You simply decline. And I'll give you an example of how that happened for me once.
The other word would be disempower.
Sure. So I'm 150 pounds. I'm not a big guy. Yeah. And I was at a concert somewhere with my wife at the time, and we were introduced to some people, and some guy and a couple come over, and then we're introduced. The guy's 6'3", he's 200 and something pounds, and he tries to alpha me, right? He gets up in my face, he pumps my hand really hard with a painful handshake, he's trying to glare at me, and all I'm doing is I'm continually to decline giving him any beta signals. Mm-hmm. I don't collapse verbally. I don't collapse physically. I match his gaze, right? And he keeps coming back to me confused, maybe 2 or 3 times over 5 minutes. He's not even aware of what he's doing, Jeff, but he's so used to being this dominant
it's a reflex.
alpha.
Sure. Yeah,
it's a reflex. So he keeps coming over, and I keep declining it. And eventually the man got so confused he had to leave. And I was there.
How interesting.
So the point of this is you very rarely have to get into any kind of combative verbal or physical escalation with somebody to hold your own. You just have to be mindful of what your physical body language is doing and what your words are doing and a few other things we'll get into. And don't give any beta signals, and the other person will be forced to either accept you as an equal or as another alpha, or leave because of cognitive dissonance. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about some of these things that happen. Eye contact, Jeff, is a big one. Prolonged eye contact between a man and a woman is courtship, but prolonged eye contact between 2 men is usually aggression. So here's the rule as I have come to understand it. When you lock eyes with another man, that is part of that initial who is dominant and who is submissive exchange. Never look down. I'm not saying that you should get stuck into eye challenges with people. I did this in the beginning, and one time I spent counted to 138 seconds with somebody until they looked away. It's stupid. Here's the rule that I came to. The submissive, the beta in any animal interaction will always look down. So when you lock eyes with another man, look at him for 3 seconds, unless he looks away first, and that's fine. Give him a good solid 3 seconds. Then nod. Turn your head and look somewhere else, but never look down. When you turn your head and look somewhere else, you're breaking that kind of hypnotic effect when you lock eyes with somebody, and you turn your eyes sideways, meaning you're not giving the man a submissive position, a submissive signal. So even though it seems like a silly thing, how you interact with someone in terms of looking at them when you meet them has a huge role, a huge effect in how you and they are going to interact in a pecking order. Again, you're not looking to stare somebody down. You're just going to decline anyone who tries to make you go submissive. Now, here's another one. Handshakes. You get these guys, and they want to just crush your hand, right?
Oh, yeah.
If you look at it, if you look at apes, the dominant ape always has their hand on top, palm down. So one of the things you'll see with toxic alpha guys is when they shake your hand, they'll do one of a couple of things. They'll squeeze real hard, right? Or they'll rotate their hand so that their palm is down, forcing your palm up. Or they'll double hand grab you, any number of things. And I get into it more in the book that's available for free for download that talks about responding to these things. For now, just remember, don't let somebody turn your hand. You force it back into an equal position. You want more information on that? Go check out the book.
Interesting. All right, well, hold on. Let's advise everyone how they can acquire the book, free download. A lot of really rules to live by here, very common sense things, which will make your pathway a little easier. Tell them.
Sure. The book is called An Invitation to Kingship, and it's available at spiritualsecretagent.com. The book is the kind of stuff that I wished I had learned as a kid, coming of age as a man. That someone had sat down and said, let me tell you all of these things now. So let me tell you, here's another way in which we're tested.
All right, one more time, Spencer, on the address for people.
Sure. spiritualsecretagent.com. It's the second book in the series. They're all free.
Very good.
Now, we're tested by men all the time, and once you see this, Jeff, you can't unsee it. Once you start noticing your hands going in pockets, your head changing, your vocals changing, maybe your voice raising up higher rather than deeper and lower, you can't unsee it. Once you see pecking orders form, you can't unsee it. These things are going to happen. You might as well know the rules of the game. Now let's talk about alpha testing from women. There's one that's a good one. It's called fitness testing. A classic example of this is the male and female polar bear, and the female is making the male chase her for 2 days through the frozen tundra to make sure he's a good specimen before she lets him impregnate her, right?
Wow.
Fitness testing.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. This is courtship. Okay. But then there's two tests that aren't fine. One is a cortisol test. And this is when the woman, this is when as a man, you've done something that lacks impeccability. And the worst thing a man can do in terms of his woman is to be socially submissive in her presence. She sees him, if you're out in public as a man with your woman and another guy or couple come over and you don't understand these rules and you're not a natural alpha and all of these submission signals start coming your way and you accept them without knowing, your woman will recognize that subconsciously or consciously. She's not going to be attracted to that. This explains why the woman can, who got Lois Lane, right? Clark Kent was a very nice guy. He never got Lois. Soup, he got Lois, right? So when this is the inexplicable thing that guys don't understand, that when their woman leaves them for the jerk, yeah, he's a jerk, but he's an alpha jerk. And a woman instinctively knows that to survive in this world, sometimes you got to have some balls. You got to have a little aggression. You got to be able to carve out what you need. And she may never have seen an alpha king. She may have never seen a noble alpha, but she knows alpha. All women know alpha, right?
Can alpha project from an intellectual strength that doesn't necessarily manifest itself physically? Can women be attracted to, and I know the answer to this, to men who are very intelligent, very well spoken, carry themselves perhaps king-like, but they don't have necessarily the physical alpha side of the tracks covered?
You don't have to be 6'4" and full of muscles to be physically alpha, Jeff. All you have to do is stand tall, shoulders back, chin up confidently, and never let anyone. Yeah,
that's a little man complex, right? That's what they call it anyway. How many enormously successful males have there been who have been 5'5", 5'7", short, but they're big. They're big.
It's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog, Jeff, and women know that. So the answer to your question is, if a man does not display physical and linguistic and behavioral signs of leadership, she may love him, she may like him, but will she have animal attraction for him? Unlikely. So the first thing is, if a man is socially submissive, and a lot of men do this without even realizing it, right? Because they don't know the rules. And the woman sees it. It's going to make her upset at some level, okay? So this is where a woman can start snapping at a guy. And one of the classic blunders a man makes is when a woman is experiencing cortisol, either she's PMSing or had a bad, stressful day, or she saw you do something that made her lose respect for you, the beta will act nicer. And she didn't want you to be nicer, Jeff. She wanted you to be stronger. So if that happens, if your woman is responding in a stressed manner because you've failed to act like a king, then when she speaks to you like that, you've got to say, hey, that's not cool, and then figure out what happened. And if it's some kind of social mistake you made, next time you go out in public, you make sure you demonstrate to her that you're the man that can take care of business. Here's another one, a second classic blunder men can make, right? This is a failure to lead. This is not when a woman has cortisol. It's when she has oxytocin. This is great. She says, darling, where would you like to go for dinner? And you say, oh, darling, I don't know. Where would you like to go? She was nurturing, and you respond to nurturing. No. She wanted you to say, hey, I want to go to that French restaurant. Be ready in half an hour. You look amazing, by the way. Right? So a failure to lead. If a woman asks a man to lead and he doesn't, if she says, hey, be alpha, be my king, and the man says, no, you be the king, right? So that's going to get rid of some of that animal attraction. Now here's something, Jeff. An alpha, well, let me rephrase this, who sees other men having sex? It's always the beta watching the alphas have sex in the animal world, Jeff. Well, what is porn? When a guy's watching porn, what is he doing? He's watching other men have sex. So porn has the effect on a man of subconsciously affirming he's a beta. Because if he was the alpha, he wouldn't be watching other men have sex. He'd be having sex.
Other men and women having sex is what you're saying.
Right. Yeah, let's be clear. A man having sex with a woman. Yeah. Right. Okay. So you shouldn't be the guy watching a man and a woman have sex. You should be the guy having the sex. And if you're watching it, you're subconscious. You're telling your subconscious you're beta. Don't do that.
I have never understood, and I'm not being elitist, I don't understand the appeal of porn. I've really never watched it. I have no interest in it. I don't understand. It's a huge industry. And is this industry designed for the beta market? It sounds like someone has figured this out.
Well, take a look at all of the fetish websites, with domination and all of these.
I don't look at any of that stuff. I just don't. Yeah. I'm not interested.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of men have their beta fantasies played out on porn. So as a man, stop watching porn. Right. It's a kind of addiction. All right. How do we make these changes? Wow. All right. Body language is pretty easy for me, Jeff. I think I got it maybe in a month to make the transition.
Yeah.
Linguistically, that took me 6 months to a year. That took a long time. So let's say someone out there is listening and they're saying, wow, you know what? Yeah, that's me. All right. What do I do? How do I start working my way out of this? If you want to start changing the social pecking order, if you want to practice moving up in the pecking order, start at a restaurant where you're already naturally in a position of kind of leadership. But when you order food, don't say, I'd like this, I'd like a steak, and how is the chicken? Just say, I'll take a steak. I'll have a glass of that wine. Change your language, right? Practice in restaurants because the waiter is already in a beta position.
Wait, I don't.
Opportunity.
I don't like the idea of somebody saying, I'll take something. How about, I would like to have, or I'll have the... I understand you're just making an example. But there are ways to order food that are alpha, beta, again. So you don't solicit from the waiter or waitress, how's the lobster tonight? How's the linguine? How's the lasagna? You say, you look at the menu, you make a decision, you make an order. It's okay to consult, though, is it not?
Yes, a king can consult with his advisors, right? But he makes a decision.
So he treats the waiter or waitress like an advisor. I got it.
You could, if you wanted to. You could say, how's the fish tonight? But you would never say, well, what would you have, or what,
I thoroughly get it. I understand.
You don't phrase it in the subjunctive. You say, I'll take this, I'll have that. All right. So restaurants are a great place to start practicing this kind of language shift. Now you can talk about new situations. The next more difficult thing is when you meet a group of new people. Nobody knows anybody.
Right.
The
5 minutes, just so you know. 5 minutes.
Gotcha. The pecking order has not been established. That's the time when you can rise by virtue of how you hold yourself. The hardest thing to shift, Jeff, is when you shift an established pecking order. Your family is used to treating you some way, your work is used to treating you some way, it's going to take a lot of time to shift that pecking order. Again, just decline any beta invitations. Now, the DNA makes provisions for the death of the pack alpha. What that means is if the alpha dies, another animal who's not as alpha has to take his position. So we have within us the gene to be activated, to be alpha, to be kings. You just have to you have to convince your genetics to turn that gene on. And it's done with body language, and it's done with linguistics, but it takes time. This is months, if not years, so stay the course. At the end of the day, debrief yourself. Find your weaknesses. Find out where you shifted from alpha to beta, and gather a few allies, other kings or other kings in the making, and say, hey, you know what? I learned something. There's some things I want to change about how I am, how I speak, how I hold myself, how I interact with other men and women. Help me out with this. If you observe something, point it out, because it's going to take a little bit of work. So this was my journey, Jeff. And again, the free book to download, there's more information than what we had time to get into now.
Yeah.
But I think you get a sense of it, because if we're going to say we need to save the world, and Lord knows there's a whole lot of things we need to change, well, who saves the world, Jeff? The hero saves the world. The king saves the world. So if we want to make a change, the best change we can make in the world is to make a change in ourselves and our kids, so that we have a nation of kings and queens, powerful, confident, strong men and women who make the world a better place and don't get roughshod by the toxic alphas that typically find themselves into political places of power. Yeah.
Interesting. So you have made the books available. How long have they been available now? Sounds like you worked on these for quite a while before you finalized them. There's a lot of very simple, but I think almost invisible information. People just don't think like this. They don't look at the circumstances that they're around, involved with, and make changes. They don't know how. So these books are very, very unusual. Good for you. Yeah, well done. Well done. Give us the address again.
Sure. The book is An Invitation to Kingship. It's the second book in the series. And the website is www.spiritualsecretagent.com.
Very good. I think there's something in there for most everyone that they can actually use and plug in almost immediately. Doesn't require any theoretic time to process it all. You read it, you do it, you see the results. I would imagine that the results, speaking of that, would be almost instantly observed by someone who was aware and was trying to do this, and they would learn. This would be a very quick lesson. Keep the palm from being turned up, keep the hand vertical, etc. These are very interesting. They're self-reinforcing.
Yeah.
Go ahead, wrap it up. We got a minute here. Go ahead.
You know, the other guys that I've talked to about this, what they've told me is their kids behave better. Their wives are more attracted to them. They have more success socially and in business. So check out the book. Try some of the things and just see what happens.
Yeah, well, I think that's the story again. Try some of the things. I think the results are going to be as you've described them, and I think they'll be very much self-reinforcing, and because your life will become a little bit easier. That's fun. This is interesting. These are guidebooks to life in a way, social interaction, and certainly self-respect, self-esteem, self-understanding. It all figures in. This is, again, most unusual. Well done, Spencer.
It was good speaking with you again, Jeff.
Thanks
for having me on.
All right. You take care. We'll talk. All right. Spencer Feldman. I think that was a very unusual hour. I've never had anyone on who has really broken it out like that so clearly. And yet we just don't think about those things. At least most of us don't. All right. That's Wednesday. Tomorrow, Thursday. Lots ahead. Not to mention that tomorrow's the last day of the month already. 1 down, 11 to go. Talk to you tomorrow night. Have a good day. 21 hours. We'll be back.